Hi there, this is Sheena Rowlands and today I'm sharing with you my latest layout for Hey Little Magpie using this Cocoa Vanilla Studio Storyteller range. So I went through the range and I picked out blues and yellows and some greens, mainly because they were the colours in the photographs that I wanted to use. It wasn't completely written in stone that I was going to use just these colours, but I wanted to use them the majority. So I actually printed off 4 photographs, all landscape, but actually I end up just using 3. So at the moment I'm just going to go through all the paper choices. In my mind I've got an idea of how I want this layout to look. I want there to be a column on the left and a smaller column on the right and the title in between. That's where my mind is thinking. So I'm just looking at cutting some strips to go on either side. Now for some reason I find it easier to cut into the 6x8 pad rather than make the first cut in a 12x12. So some of these strips are longer than the 6x8, but I'm actually going to just join 2 together, because if they're underneath the photos or underneath another strip, you're not really going to notice. And initially I cut some of this like watercolour type paper to go at the back, and I'm just shortening it to make it shorter than the strips. So I'm just playing as I go along. I haven't pre-cut anything in advance. So I'm winging it essentially. All 3 photographs were taken at this same event, but they were taken over a long weekend, and they feature myself and 2 friends at a hen do or a hen weekend. So I think that as they all go together essentially, and they all have similar colours, they work well together on this layout. So my mind is thinking a little bit about that strip on the right as well. Looking at this cut apart sheet, see if there's anything on there that might be useful to use on this layout. I have used this range before a couple of times, so I haven't got everything left, but there's still loads for me to pick and choose from. I particularly like the colours in this range. It's got quite a deep blue, which you don't get in many scrapbooking ranges, and I think actually the others companies need to catch on, because it works really well, and it's one of my favourite parts of it, so that's why I've got all the blue bits out to go on this layout. It makes a real change to have such a dark colour. So I've just decided that even though I love the blue and the yellow, I just wanted a tiny bit more contrast. So I'm going to bring in this small floral print. It's just got a tiny bit of pink and red in it, which just means that when I come to embellish later, it just opens up my options. So what I'm going to do is start to distress the edges of these strips, stick the ones together that if they've been cut from the 6x8 paper pad or from something shorter, and then I'll start to think about how it's going to go together. But so far so good. I'm quite pleased with the way that it's looking. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it doesn't feel as spontaneous as this, but that's just the way it goes. I think by trying to get 3 photographs on here as well, that's filling some of the space. I'm not very minimal when I come to make layouts. I do tend to use quite a lot of the cardstock, just the way it is. I do mix the sizes a little bit more. I do a few A4s that you might find videos of, but majority of layouts that I make are actually 12x12. So I decided to get rid of the watercolour paper at the back, and I brought in the check. It was a piece left over from a previous layout, but I just think that little bit of texture makes a difference. So I think I actually like the way that cluster's now coming together. So I'm just going to trim it down a little bit more, and then I can just distress its edges. I don't know whether you're constrained by time when it comes to creating. I am at work part-time, so I don't get every day to get some crafting done. Try and fit it in around everything else that I do. But the downside is I'm quite slow, so sometimes these layouts are made over a couple of days, or I come back in after work and spend a bit more time on it. So yeah, it takes me a while sometimes, or very rarely does something come together really quick for me, unfortunately. But I do like the process, luckily. Otherwise, that would make it that would be terrible. But I do enjoy it. I enjoy the faffing. So I'm just trying to choose a title. I like that best ever card, and I cut the best ever out by hand. I fussy cut it. Now you'll find these stamps in the Hey Little Magpie store. They're by Stamps Anonymous, I think, Stampers Anonymous. They're called brush strokes. I've got an ink oxide or two there, and I'm just adding a little bit of ink, basically to go between the strips. So I've left them on the cardstock on the left of me, so I can lift the pieces over just to have a look. Just trying to mix the ink up a little bit. So at the moment I'm not using any water at all, because I find that obviously that buckles the cardstock. I mean, I don't mind that when it happens, but I don't need it to happen for this. So I'm just trying to see where to add the yellow so that it covers the area where I want the title to be. You can see that I'm not using an acrylic block with these stamps. They're not meant to give full coverage anyway, and with the textured white basil underneath, you are just getting a random pattern, and that's perfect. I'm just going to now flick a little bit of water over the top because they are oxide inks, and that will bring a little bit of the ink off, but I certainly don't want to drench this cardstock at this stage. So I'm just going to come in with one of the colours and just put some flicks over the top. They're only small, just to break up the rest of the cardstock. So the cardstock is dry. I've brought in the two strips, the two columns, and I decided I actually want to add a tiny bit more colour into the right hand one, and it's just one of the checked papers from the same range, and it just goes into that blue strip, which is actually a manufacturer's strip. So I've stuck the bases of the strips down, and I'm going to now add the photos on foam pads over the top. I find that when I'm working from a range, I never throw any of it away. So like the manufacturer's strips or any offcuts, I keep all of them so that you never know when they're going to come in handy. So I'm just now coming in with some of the ephemera, particularly the flowers, and I'm going to add them around that camera there, probably on a little bit of foam just to lift them off. I do like the way the title sits in the centre, and I could do with doing a couple more clusters. I'm going to do one to fill the gap by the title, and another at the bottom left, but at the bottom of the third photograph is, and then maybe a little bit more further up, which I'm just thinking about. So I've brought in all the embellishments that I like the look of on that card on the left. I've also got some word strips there. It says, "I never want to forget. This makes me so happy. Love this wild and precious life." So I think they all fit these photographs. So I'm going to add those two on a little bit of foam, and they're from one of the cut apart sheets. So a little cluster of flowers going up near the top there. So I'm just seeing if there's any other bits that I want to add. The banner at the bottom under the photos says, "Making me smile. This weekend certainly did that and more." So it seems like a perfect sentiment to add here. So I'm just going to work my way around the clusters and just decide whether I want to add anything more to them. Actually, I'm raising things up on foam because I do like a little bit of depth. I don't worry too much about how much space they fill in an album or how many page protectors I get in. I just like that feeling of the layers on a layout. So I'm just going to get those flower clusters stuck down. Going to add a little bit of foam behind that cut title. It's fussy cut quite well. I find it a little bit tough getting the bits out of the centre of the B and the E, but with a little bit of perseverance and a scalpel I managed to do that. So I just want to make sure I filled the gaps in between so there's no like glaringly white space around the title there. I do come in off camera at the very end and I add some letter stickers below the title, so it ends up being Best Ever Trip. And they were some Ellie Studio letter stickers, which I actually just inked over and made them yellow, and you'll see that in the finished image at the end. So I've just brought this flower cluster down a little bit to where it joins those two, where those two photographs join, and it covers one of the joins in the papers behind, so that's perfect there. Just tucking in some greenery as well. So at the very beginning I was going to use blue, yellow and green, and I think the majority of that is there. There's some very small touches of pinks and reds, and I just think that helps lift the layout. I've got some butterflies as well, so I'm going to think about where I'm going to position them. I'm going to try and add 3 because the rule of threes works really well, and it just takes your eye around the layout. So I want it to take you from the photos to the title and back again. Also at the last minute I added some stitching off camera. Just before I went to photograph the layout I thought actually that might work. So I added some cross stitches below where the camera is on the right, one on the Make It Smile banner at the bottom, and one above the cluster of flowers top left, of which you'll see in the close-up. So here's the full image and some of the close-ups as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a look in the Hey Little Magpie store where all this range is available, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.